Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a to-do list with local storage. As you can see, I've already added some items to my to-do list. Let me go ahead and add one more. All right, this item is going to get added to the bottom of the list. I can also delete items by clicking on the check mark, or I can edit items by clicking on this button. So I'm going to go ahead and add some apostrophes in here, click save, and this has now been saved. This also displays the current date. So this is today's date. And of course, we are using local storage. So if we click on the refresh button, this is not going to get deleted off of the screen. All right, let's get right into this tutorial. All right, guys, let's get started. First thing we want to do is bring in the Font Awesome CDN because we are going to be using icons in this project. So open up your browser. You're going to search for Font Awesome CDN. You're going to click on this link from cdnjs.com. You're going to click on here to copy this URL. And you're going to paste it up here. Just type in link and then Control V. All right, let's create a main element. We're going to give this a class name of app. Let's add a title. It's going to say my to-do list. And right under here, we're going to create a class with the name of input header. Let's add the date in here. So let's create a span. We're going to give this an ID name of date. And right under here, we're going to create another class with the name of to-do input. So let's add an input in here. Let's give this an ID name of item. Let's add a placeholder. This is going to say enter a task. And then right next to this, we're going to create a button. It's going to say enter. Let's give this an ID name of enter. All right, right under the input header, you're going to create another class called to-do list. And this is where the actual to-do list items are going to go. All right, let's move on to the CSS. All right, let's access a class with the name of update controller, and we're going to set display to none. Now, we haven't actually created this class just yet. We will with JavaScript. For now, we just want to set display to none because we don't want to see this class as we're building our application. And we're also not going to add the rest of the CSS just yet. We want our application to work first. So we're going to be working with the JavaScript. And once the application is done, then we're going to come back to the CSS and complete the design. All right, let's go back to our HTML and open with live server. And you should have something that looks like this. All right, now let's go into the JavaScript and let's get started here. So the first thing we want to do is display the date. So let's create a function called display date. And we're going to store the date in this variable. We're going to use the built-in date class. And I'm going to do a console log so you can see what is inside that. And let's go ahead and call on this function as soon as the page loads. All right. So now if we look at our console, we should see this here. Now we don't need all of this stuff. We just need the month, day, and the year. So let's get access to that. So to do that, we're going to do toString. We have to convert it to a string first. And then we have to use this built-in function called split. And we want to split it wherever there's a space. So let's do another console log so you can see what we have now. And now we have an array with all of these indexes. So we just want to get access to index 1, 2, and 3 to grab what we need. All right, we're going to display that on the screen. So remember, we created a span with an ID of date. We want to access the inner HTML, and we want to set it equal to the first, second, and third index. All right, so now we should have the date on our project. All right, cool. So now let's check if we are using local storage. To do that, we're going to create a variable called items array. To check if we're using local storage, we're going to use local storage dot get item, and we're going to check if a key with the name of items exists. If it does exist, then we want to parse whatever is inside of there, and we want to store it inside of our items array variable. So once again, we're going to use get item, and then we're going to pass it in the name of the key. However, if we are not using local storage, then we just want to set this items array equal to an empty array. So let's do a console log, and we should see an empty array because we are not using local storage as yet. All right, so now let's add an event listener to this button, so when the user clicks it, we can add an item to our to-do list. We give that button an ID name of enter, and this is going to be a click event. All right, so let's grab whatever the user inputted into the input. Let's grab that with query selector. That input, we give it an ID name of item. All right, so now that we have the item, we're going to pass it on to this function called create item. And let's go ahead and create that function. All right, so now that we have the item, we want to store it inside of our items array, and then we want to save it in local storage. So let's do items array push item.value. All right, we have stored it in the items array. Now let's save it in local storage. To save it in local storage, you use set item, you pass in the key name, and then you use JSON stringify, and then you pass it in the items array. All right, now we're going to refresh the page so we can see the update on the screen. All right, let's try it. So let's add something in here. I'm going to put wash my car, and we should see the items array now has this item inside. Let's add something else. All right, there we go. All right, so now let's access this array and display these items on the screen. All right, so we're going to create another function. We're going to call this one display items. Let's create a variable items. We're going to initialize it to an empty string, and now we're going to use a for loop to loop the items array. And for each one of the items inside of this array, we're going to create some HTML for it. So let's go ahead and create the HTML over here, since it's a little bit easier to create HTML here. So let's create a class with the name of item, and inside of that, create another class with the name of input controller. And right under that, create a class with the name of update controller. And inside of here, we're going to create a text area. You can go ahead and delete the name, ID, columns, and rows. And we're going to disable this text area. And right under this, we're going to create another class with the name of edit controller. And in here, we're going to be adding two icons, one to delete items from the list, and then one to edit items from the list. So let's go grab some icons. So let's search for the Font Awesome library. And we're going to search for a check. This one here. Just click that to copy it, and then you're going to paste it in there. All right, now let's search for an edit button. This one here. All right, so in addition to the class names that it already has, we want to add one more. So for this, we're going to add a class with the name of delete button, and this one, a class name of edit button. All right, for the update controller, let's create a button, and this is going to be a save button. So let's give it a class name of save button. And let's create another one right under that one. This is going to be the cancel button. So let's type in cancel in here as well. All right, let's cut this, and we're going to paste it in here. So first, we're going to use the variable that we created items, and we were going to set it equal to this. Let's create backticks and paste the code in there. All right, we're going to add one more thing in here. Instead of the text area, we're going to add the money symbol and then brackets. And in here, we're going to use items array, all right, and we're going to use the index as well. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to do document, query selector. We're going to get access to the to-do list class that we created in the HTML file, and we're going to set the inner HTML equal to the items. All right, so now let's go ahead and make a function call to that. So display items. And now if we look over here, we should see these two items on the screen. All right, so now let's add event listeners to the delete and the edit button. Let's start with the edit button. And we're going to do that right under here. And the reason is because we want to add them as soon as we have created the buttons. So at this point, they have been created. All right, so we're going to create a function called activate delete listeners. And we also want to create another function or call on a function called activate edit listeners. And we're also going to call on another one called activate save listeners. And one more, activate cancel listeners. All right, let's start off with this one, activate delete listeners. You can create it right under here. All right, so let's get access to all of our delete buttons. We're going to use query selector all for that. And for each one of these buttons, we're going to add an event listener. So let's use for each, and let's get access to each one of these buttons and the index that they belong to. We're going to do db add event listener. Click event. All right, so anytime that you click on one of these buttons, it's going to call on a function called delete item, and we're going to pass it in the particular index that we want to delete. All right, so now let's create that function. All right, so we want to delete this item from the items array. To do that, we're going to use the built-in function splice. We want to delete this index. We pass in the I, and we only want to delete that, so we pass in a 1. All right, now that we have deleted this item from the items array, we want to update our local storage. All right, once again, we're going to reload the page so we can see the updates on the screen. All right, so now if I click on this button, it should delete that item from the screen. All right, now let's add the event listeners for the edit button. So whenever you click on this button, this should make the cancel and save buttons visible, and it should also allow us to edit the text area. So let's get access to the edit buttons and store them in this variable. We also want to get access to the update controller, which contains the save and cancel buttons. And we also want to get access to the text areas. We're going to store them in this variable inputs. All right, so we're going to do the same thing that we did for the delete button. We're going to use for each to add event listeners to each one of these buttons. All right, so whenever you click on the edit button, we want to display the cancel and save buttons. So we're going to do style display equal to block. Because remember, in the CSS file, we set display none to the update controller. All right, and we also want to make this particular text area enabled. So we're going to set disabled equal to false. All right, so now if we go back over here and we click on the edit button, you should be able to see the save and cancel button, and you should also be able to add information in here. All right, now let's add an event listener to the save button. So when you click it, it can save the information that you just added. All right, so this is the activate save listeners. So let's get access to all of these save buttons, just like we did with the other functions. And we also want to get access to the inputs. All right, well, once again, we're going to use for each to add an event listener to each one of these buttons. All right, so whenever the user clicks on the edit button, we're going to call in a function called update item. And we're going to pass it in the value of this particular text area and also the index. All right, now let's create this function, update item. All right, so in here, we're going to set the particular index that the user is editing equal to the text that they have just inputted. And now that we did that, we want to update local storage. And once again, we're going to reload the page so we can see the edits. All right, so now if we go back over here, we click on this button and let's add a couple hyphens in there, click save, and the page has reloaded. And as you can see, this has been updated. All right, now let's add the event listeners for the cancel button. So when the user clicks this, this can go back to how it was. All right, so let's get access to the cancel buttons, just like we did with the other ones. And we also want to get access to the update controllers. And to the text areas as well. All right, once again, we're going to use for each to add an event listener to each one of these buttons. All right, so when you click on this button, we want to set the update controller equal to display none. So let's use style display none. So this is going to hide the save and cancel button. And the text area, we want to set it to disabled. All right, so now if we click on this and then click cancel, it's going to hide both of the buttons and we're not going to be able to type into the text area. All right, and that should do it for our JavaScript. Let me just go ahead and add a couple more things in here before we move on to the CSS. All right, cool. So now let's move on to the CSS so we can make this look nice. And I'm going to go ahead and split the screen for this one so you can see the changes in real time. All right, let's go ahead and delete this. We're going to be adding that in a little bit later. And we also want to bring in the Google Font API because I'm going to be using a custom font here. So I'm going to search for the Google Font API. I'm going to click on this link here and go ahead and search for a font that you want to use. I'm going to use one called Shadows into Light, this one here. And go ahead and select it by clicking on this. And then you want to click on here so you can see this. You're going to want to copy this, and that is going to go in between your head tags. All right, so you now have access to that font. Now I'm not going to be covering the rest of the CSS in here. This tutorial was mainly focused for the JavaScript portion, which we have now learned how to do. The CSS is really not the job of a software engineer, it's more the job of a designer. Now I do like to design myself, make my applications look nice and neat, but I don't like to spend a whole lot of time explaining this stuff because I am not an actual designer. I'm more of a software engineer, backend guy. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the code in here. Feel free to design this application however you see fit. If you like my design, then go ahead and just keep the code that I have. If not, then once again, go ahead and design it however you want to. I will leave a link in the description to the CSS so you guys can copy and paste it. All right, and if you did everything correctly, you should see something that looks like this. And as you can see, it has all of the functionality that we have added. So we can save, we can delete, we can hit cancel, and if we click on the refresh button, our items are still going to be on the list. All right, that's going to be it for this video. Please make sure to hit the like button if you found this useful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.